Hi, my name is Laura Raborn. I am here in Madrid at the art residency, and I'm from Little Rock, Arkansas in the United States. I've come here for a 6-week program that's included daily coaching, development of style, lots of research, trying different materials to create a body of work. And I've done about 30 studies that led to roughly 15 to 18 final pieces that are in a show that is opening called Object Objection. During the research, doing these little studies, I used things like watercolor pencils, lots of water-soluble materials, acrylics. I used oil paint on some of the pieces, and they're all works on paper. First, we'll stop at this Goya-inspired piece. I couldn't leave Spain without doing one piece in honor of my favorite artist in the whole world, Francisco Goya. His piece was called No te escaparás, you will not escape. I've titled this one Te escaparás, you will escape. And I have used 10 words every girl should learn, which is an article by Soraya Chamali. And she wrote, "Stop interrupting me, I just said that, no explanation needed," are the 10 words. So I've put them on the dress and turned the Goya piece kind of into a positive feminist piece. Now the rest of the exhibit is in a different format. It's on magazine cover style. And the reason I chose that was to use a mass communication form for communication to women. Magazines have a huge influence on the population in the United States, and they really solidify gender norms. So they tell women what products to buy, what our bodies should look like. So I've really kind of taken that and turned it on its head, created a little bit of a conflict on purpose by presenting feminist issues on magazine covers, like this one, How to Be Seen and Heard at Work. Next to it, there is a PSA style or public service announcement style piece. And the goal with that was to use another mass communication form for positive changes. So rather than just addressing the problem, I've tried to also offer solutions. So let's move on. This one is how to protect yourself on public transportation. Most women who use public transportation have experienced at least one time some level of harassment. It could just be someone inappropriately touching you, not kind of giving you personal space or honoring any kind of boundary, all the way to more severe harassment and even assault. And again, I've offered some solutions. You can see on the woman, she's got a tattoo on her arm saying hands off, and there's a man behind her leaning really uncomfortably closely to her. And then her skin is painted in black and white. And that just represents kind of the life being drained out of her, not really being allowed full autonomy and someone kind of encroaching on her space. And this one is called Sexism Silences. The green and red really contrast each other, and the red words on her dress are all sexist comments. And it's transparent. It's kind of like making her disappear. And then here in the PSA style are the positive comments that are specific to the sexist comments on her dress. They're kind of basic, but a lot of women don't feel like we have the right to say them, or it's going to be rude, or it's going to be angry. These are just simple things to say, but sometimes we just need to talk about them and practice. Moving on to this piece, this one is one that continues some work I've done before about the objectification of women. This one is a little bit different, and this is where the residency really helped me develop a style that I'm more satisfied with, that's more effective and interactive with the viewer. It also offers positive pathways to the problem. So we can see her tattoo says, "I am not," and then there are all these objects that are tattooed on her body and handwritten right here. On the PSA next to it, there are answers to when somebody objectifies you, just how to handle that and why it even matters. It seems kind of like a mundane, minor thing, but big results come from small, mundane words and actions. And then finally, we've got another one about silencing, and this has 2 images kind of layered on top of each other. Here, her mouth is bound, and then we've got tips for speaking up here on the PSA next to it. As you may be able to see, this one is on collaged paper, And that was one thing that I wanted to work on at the residency, and that is learning how to use language effectively in these pieces. Sometimes there was too much language and it became busy or messy. So one way to solve that and provide the solutions was by collaging it under the painting and drawing. And those collaged words are based on the research and reading I've done throughout the 6-week program. And speaking of research, we're about to open the show, and we will have a talk with Dr. Katie Crawford from Vanderbilt University, who specializes in gender norms.
Hello, hi.
Hi. Hi.
We are officially open to public at 7. Maybe later if some people will come in and see the works, and you can also cut me at any time if you want. Welcome to our channel, and today we have a great honor to welcome Professor Dr. Catherine Crawford, our guest speaker. She's a scholar in gender and sexuality studies and history, currently serving as a professor at Vanderbilt University.
I mostly do the history of gender and sexuality. My most recent book was on eunuchs and castrati, and I studied them as transgendered subjects who had been forcibly transgendered because they had been deliberately castrated. And the idea there was to provide some of the longer history behind the notion that gender is not binary, which obviously is kind of politically important now. What else have I written on? I wrote a book on regencies in early modern France that is, if you're into that kind of thing, it's a great book. I wrote on the sexual culture of the French Renaissance, which is the only one that has a fair amount of visual material. And I'm editing a collection of essays on prostitution in the Renaissance.
Your expertise is in the history, what happened in the past. Was there any successful movements in the history of, maybe modern history of Europe, that successfully changed some kind of gender norms or inequality?
Well, yes and no. I don't know that it changed things, but it changed the conversation. So starting in the Middle Ages, there is a thing called the Quarrel des Femmes, the Quarrel of Women, which is this battle over the status of women. It starts off with people saying they're not human, only men are human, and women write back and go what? No, no, no. And this goes back and forth literally for hundreds of years. It ebbs and flows. And in the 17th century in particular, as women start to have more access to education and more access to print culture, there start to be people who are like, well, wait, are we sure that women shouldn't have things like political rights? Again, it takes a really long time, and there are some changes along the way. But if you're looking for a big, overthrow kind of moment, not really. Sexism, like racism, is incredibly sticky. It keeps glomming on to things. Just when you think, oh, we're past that, it's back. It doesn't really go away.
So it goes in circles.
Yeah, I was talking actually to some students about this recently. We, particularly in the West, have this idea of progress, right? And things are getting better all the time, and so on and so on. And I actually think that it's very important to distinguish between change and progress. We have progress in things. We do. We know much more about medicine and science and things like that. Things where there are facts, where you can have objective information and you can build on it and you can develop it. But most social stuff is change. Some of it accumulates to being better. We have rights for women in most countries. Most, not all, and not always stable ones. That is progress, but it's also mostly change. That is, it can be undone pretty easily. One of the things about Laura's art, where she's highlighting things like women's magazines or popular magazines, I kept thinking when I was looking at that about in the 19th century, there were these incredibly important women's magazines that told people how to be women. In the 19th century, we're now in the 21st century, it's the same thing. Society doesn't necessarily progress, it just changes. And people, I think, confuse these. We're done with that. We're over. We're done. We don't have to fight that anymore. Not really.
And what about the role of art, visual arts? It's not just painting, but maybe other visual communication like posters, design, illustration, and crafts as well. What is role in changing or challenging gender?
Oh, I think it's huge. How do you get your ideas about what women are or can be or should be in a culture? Well, they're the women you see, but there are a lot more women you don't see. Where do you see them? You see them on the walls of a church, on a painting, or on a woodcut. This is how people learn much more than their environment. And those images, good and bad, are how they understand other women, other classes. All those things go together. So I think it's actually hugely important to understand the range of possibilities. That's the most basic and obvious thing.
Art sometimes is seen as a elitist activity,
Yeah.
especially contemporary art. You go to Art Basel, it's blue chip, and only the institutional and high net worth individual collectors can enter, and it seems to be a social class thing. And how does it touch the changes in the mass communication?
I think that there's a lot more, art, capital A, high wealth individuals, having access to things like Art Basel that where you have to know a lot to know even what you're looking at. But there's an awful lot happening that's not at that high level. Yeah, okay, there's, only a few people are going to get to see a Raphael in the 16th century, but a surprisingly large number of people are going to get to see the etching of that painting because it's reproduced everywhere. And there are now, because of printing, 10,000 copies of it. Maybe it's not the same as the original, but it's close. There is super duper high art, exclusive stuff. There's also so much more access to all kinds of art, of imagery, of, if anything, the problem is now there's just too much to even begin to know where to go. Okay, so I mostly work on older stuff, so you might get to see the etching or the woodcut or whatever, but you're not going to see 10,000 of them. You can see 10,000 woodcuts in a day on your computer now. I think it's a totally different problem. And it's not just a question of volume. We think so differently than we did in the past. So think about all the things you have seen today. I saw probably 1,000 cars on the street. I saw 25 different people. I saw street signs. I saw, and I start listing it all. And I was like, now imagine yourself in a village in Spain in 1700. What are you going to see on your walk to work? A dog, 2 houses, and maybe a cow. Your visual overload is a lot lower.
But when you say working to work, I was more thinking about I would be scrolling YouTube Shorts, Instagram feeds, Facebook messages, and even like I was like, oh, I saw this thing yesterday, but what was that? And I don't even recall.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's a different issue. One of the things that I say to people, to students and to other people is actually slow down and think about the amount you're seeing, and then pick out the things that you actually want to see, and then ask a question about each one that leads you to something unexpected.
As an artist, how do you insert yourself in this very busy feeds of people's social media? Like, for example, do you think their messages should be stronger? Should be a scream from the bottom of their hearts? Or should their images to be more direct? Just tell me what you want to say and don't play puzzles and charades. Or should it be more seductive? Like, oh, people want to see hot girls on Instagram? Give them hot girls, but with a message.
I think either of those is fine. No, I'm serious. I don't live on Instagram, so I'm not maybe the one to ask on that one. I think that linking things that people know to things they don't know is really the way to do it. However you do it. If you want to yell at them, if you want to say, hey, hot girl's here. Oh, by the way. I think there are ways in. And I don't even think it's necessarily sneaky, because I think that a lot of what happens on everything from, TikTok to Facebook is getting people to pay attention long enough to get them engaged.
But what is feminism and what is gender equality to you?
God. Okay. I'm going to start with gender equality. First of all, people don't know what gender is. We're not even close to gender equality because people think gender is sex. They think it's, men equal women. And I think gender is all the ways in which people express their masculinity and femininity in the complicated ways that their own bodies do it, that their own situations do it as a cultural practice. So my partner and I are sort of redoing a house. Someone said, well, does it threaten your masculinity that she's really good at X? And I'm like, it never would have crossed my mind to think about that. Like, I don't think in those terms. But people assume if you're, in a certain kind of relationship, somebody's got to be the guy. Like, what the hell is that, right? Gender equality to me would be let everybody be what they want to be. Who cares? What is feminism? Feminism, to me, is the assumption that women, just like men, have a range of possibilities and expectations in their lives, and you don't just ding them because they're women. We are rights-bearing individuals, or we should be. We should have the rights and the expectations to certain kinds of things. All of us. You might not be capable of that to a certain point in your life because you're too young. You might be incapable of it because of physical or mental incapacity, although it doesn't deprive you of most of the basic ones. That's feminism to me, that we all get that and we all get it the same. And we're so far from anywhere close to that it boggles my mind.
I totally agree that people don't see the terms the same way, not even close. Like, you throw out the definition, another person would understand it and interpret it completely differently. I had an artist who, said, I believe in feminism. I said, okay, in which way? And she said, I believe all the women should be the most feminine possible.
Fine, that's fine for her.
And I was like, that's feminism? And she's like, yeah, that's feminism, because you need to be feminine.
That's fine. Go for it, girl. Again, in my universe, that would be fine if it wasn't that she would probably also get trashed for being too feminine.
Yeah. What is your advice to artists who are discovering this subject of gender and sexuality, entering this domain, trying to express, but they don't have the theoretical foundation, they don't have the vocabulary, and they don't have maybe much support from their community, maybe they don't know other people who are in this field? What would be your starter toolkit entering into this little world of creating feminist art?
Rage is good. And reading Rage Becomes Her is a good place to start. Sarah Ahmed's Feminist Killjoy, which might be something like How to Be a Feminist Killjoy, but you put Sarah Ahmed and Feminist Killjoy and you'll get it. And that is a great book about what it means to just not take shit. And I think if you're going to be an artist, you have to be really tough in not taking shit. There's too many people who are going to be saying, don't do that, or you're doing it, what is that, or whatever. So I would start with reading, and I would start with reading books like that are meant to provoke you into thinking about how you work through issues in the world. It's really great to read things like Kimberly Crenshaw, who wrote about intersectionality. I think it's really great to read Bell Hooks because she really gets at the problems of white feminism, not seeing other kinds of issues. Do a little research, try something, and then decide it either doesn't work or that's not the answer. I think that one thing that people are sometimes afraid to do is to fail. No, I think you can fail. You can just say, nah, this one didn't work. And either it's a draft or it's something came out of it or nothing came out of it, but the nothing in itself is significant. So I would say two things: research and try.
If someone wants to dedicate maybe more time studying gender and sexuality, maybe do a master's degree, maybe do a PhD, or coming from outside of this domain, maybe coming from art, what would be your advice to the people who are trying to do serious research?
It depends on your goals. If you want to do it all the way, get a master's degree, get a PhD, absolutely, you can do that. But two things. One, you probably have to pay for the master's. You should not pay for the PhD. Somebody else should be funding your PhD, because if you have to fund that yourself, Unless you're independently wealthy, it's not worth it because it's just, it's very difficult, to get a job with that. And unless you want a PhD just for having a PhD, in which case, God bless you.
That's me. I self-fund my own PhD studies.
It can be done, but it's hard. It's hard. There are a lot of places where you can take classes. Like my school has a continuing ed program for adults who want to learn more about stuff. At Vanderbilt and many other places I know, say the gender department is very small, but the classes are all full of students. And the classes we offer to adults are all full of students because people want to know. So it is possible to find these things. And then you can decide if you need more. There's certainly plenty to read. If you pick up Sarah Ahmed's book, she's got a whole reading list in the back. You can start there.
Many artists asked me, hey, I want to do this project that is touching upon a social issue like gender. Another one maybe about my subject is censorship, and media freedom. And then they're like, oh, do you think this project is good or valid? And I always joked and I say, if a PhD student can write about your future project as his or her thesis and graduate without an issue, then it's a solid project proposal. Would you agree, or do you have a better analysis?
That's actually pretty good. I think that's actually pretty good. I hadn't really thought about it like that, but yeah, I'll take it. I haven't supervised any in art. I've supervised a couple in history who've used art. And there, it's mostly about how do people visualize things in the past. One student, for instance, worked on ideas of masculinity and medical texts. So a lot of the stuff was, well, how do you actually depict the male body as the understanding of it is changing? So from a very religious understanding to a more scientific anatomical understanding. So those images over time tell a story.
Why do you think those images got kept in the history and some others maybe did not? Why they were the chosen one? What worries they have?
I spent a lot of time thinking about this. I think the images of the human body, there's some really amazing things about this. I'm actually working on this thing right now. The human penis, it's actually a pretty simple organ. When you dissect it, it has one tube. Yes?
Never had the pleasure.
We understand now that the urethra, both semen, sperm, etc., and urine go through one tube. Well, they were dissecting human bodies, including penises, and then they would draw them with 2 passages or 3. There's only one. You can look at it. There's only one, but they saw 2 or 3. 2 if they thought there was one for sperm and one for urine. 3 if they thought there was one for sperm, one for urine, and one for pneuma or spirit. So what did they see? They saw what they wanted to see. I'm actually quite fascinated by this phenomenon of looking at this thing and not seeing what is actually in front of you.
Yeah, maybe many things that today we discuss, we believe that there are dozens of different types of gender and we classify it a certain way. We let people carry their legal documents, classifying their gender in a certain way, and maybe that would all change in another century.
If we last that long. I don't think we have good odds on that, I'll tell you.
So what is the future of the discourse on gender and sexuality?
If I knew that, I would be so rich.
How would you capitalize it?
Yeah, no, I actually, so in all seriousness, I think that we're at a really delicate moment. It could go completely back to a notion of, strict binary gender, masculinity is X, femininity is Y, and they never shall meet again, at least socially. It is also possible that both in reaction to that and because really that makes no sense, people will start to understand that gender and sex are not the same thing. That gender is just how you present your mix of who you are. At which point people can calm the bleep down about gender. And we would all be a lot better off. I don't know which way it's going to go. We'll probably muddle along with both for a while, and then something terrible will happen, like an asteroid will hit, and we won't care anymore. Okay, that was sort of a joke and sort of not.
I would say the future is going to be risky
Oh, yeah.
to dedicate one's career on it,
Yeah, oh, yeah.
scholarly career or artistic career, right?
I actually just advised a student who's thinking about graduate school about this. I advised her to take a year to think about it rather than to decide precipitously to invest a lot of time and energy and money when it may not be a good bet at all. I don't know if years enough time to tell, but we'll see. You said you started really thinking about these things in 2016. So how did you get interested? Was it the sort of Trump shock or what?
Yeah, it was during the presidential campaign. I guess a lot of people in the country, both conservative and progressive, are feeling this way, that whatever you are, Democrat, Republican, any side of anything, that was a real shift in the language we were hearing from politicians. Of course, if you really learn a lot about history, which I have not enough to very specifically speak about this, but my understanding is that there's been political discourse that has been extremely violent and harsh and throughout our history. So this isn't necessarily a new thing, but it was new to me. That made me interested in the words that we were hearing and using, and that made things that seemed abhorrent, no matter what side of things you were on, it shifted to people kind of getting used to a new level of rhetoric, a new low level of rhetoric. Because I've been interested in text in art for many years, I started to make art with text. And so much was said during that time about women. Lots of clips, it was all recorded. I mean, you could be in a silo and maybe have missed it, but it'd be real tough to miss some of, grab them by the whatever. And I don't know how many people missed that one. And people just decided that was okay. And so I just could kind of feel like a real cultural shift toward the view and treatment of others. And for others, I mean, like half the world's population. So it's kind of a big group.
I think the last time there was the obvious one in the 20th century is Nazi Germany. And before that, you'd have to go to like the French Wars of Religion in the 16th century to see the kind of denigration of groups that we have been seeing. And never have I seen, or do I know of, this kind of systematic sexism that became so obvious. And I was talking to someone recently who's interested in the humanities as a way of thinking about the future. She said, why is it that people are so down on the humanities? And I said, well, quite frankly, I don't know, because I think that's where we find our spaces of commonality, of communion. We're just being really bad at it lately. And one of the things that I really like about your work and your goals for your work is that you want to find the spaces of empathy, not just here's a shitty thing that people say, but there's a person here. There's danger here to people, to actual humans, to lives and ways of being. I can imagine what you might say about what draws you to empathy as one of your central thematics, but I'd like to actually hear what you have to say as opposed to imagining it.
I guess since I was a child, I've always been one of those kids that I have a daughter who was called sensitive when she was little, and I was like, I totally understand that. And it's a superpower, but it just means you can use all your senses and you really feel them all, like maybe more than some people. I've always been like that, where I really feel what someone else is experiencing. And I got really lucky to attend public schools in Little Rock, Arkansas. And that put me around a really wide variety of people. And so you're just taking in information that helps you hone those empathy skills, where you realize your viewpoint is limited. The opinions that you have formed or been taught may not be right. And all of those lessons just led to empathy. There are books about this, about really noticing people. If you're in the grocery store checkout line, maybe not being on the phone, making eye contact with the person helping you, honoring them for just a second. And I think if we can do that in an empathetic way, that all of this divisiveness doesn't quite take root as strongly.
Those little gestures are huge. And, they make fun of us. And a lot of the Northerners make fun of us. I live in Tennessee, so it's not quite Arkansas, but it's literally not a million miles away. And they make fun of us because we're nice in a state that's deeply divided, as Tennessee is. It goes a long way. It goes a long way to just seeing a person as a person. I assume that most people care about someone else. There are sociopaths, but most people care about someone else. If it's a parent, a child, a friend, whatever. I always imagine that you could get them to empathy by saying, well, don't you care about that person? So we agree, we both care about someone, because there's so much telling us what we don't need and don't want and who we are supposed to hate and so on and so on.
We could have the whole talk about
We
that.
could have the whole thing on that, but let's talk about rage. So
Let's go from empathy to rage.
exactly, because I'm going somewhere. Like, okay, so I'll just give you the trajectory. You spoke, separately to me about rage and this feminist rage, really. I'm one of those people who's like a little squeamy about rage. Like, I don't like to get angry. I like pretend that I don't get angry because I tend to screw up when I get angry. So rage, I'm really interested in, how does it give you energy? How does it give you purchase on your project?
Okay, so I don't even know if I really feel rage, but that's probably a little bit of denial.
We're not supposed to, because we're girls.
Am I going to admit it? How to channel it, how to use it, how to address it or accept it, and then what to do. That is one thing I liked about Soraya Chimley's book, Rage Becomes Her. She doesn't have some sort of magic spell, magic bullet for channeling your rage, but she does talk about small ways you can walk through your life that help you regain some power and control over yourself and the way people view you. And she talks about the fact that if we just talk about these things more, if we'll just say it's okay to be angry about this, like if we just have a conversation about it, say, can you think of something we could do? Like, this is what happened. But instead, we're told to stuff it down. We shouldn't be angry, that's unappealing, that's wrong, that's unattractive, whatever. You look like. One of the pieces has a quote that my husband heard at work. Why does she act like a man? And he came home and told me that a coworker said that. And of course, I was like, I'm going to make some art. So that is what.
There you go. It propels you.
To say, I don't know if what I do with my rage is pour it into the art, but the art definitely helps me with that because it helps me think through, like, why do I feel this way? And am I wrong to feel this way? What do I need to learn about this situation? Is there anything I can do about it? Maybe I'll read something about it. Maybe there's other people feeling this the same way. So, and then having conversations with other people to say, it's okay to feel angry about this because it's a really difficult.
It's a really terrible thing.
And that is where this group of art really helped me. And the coaching through this residency really helped me. And that is like, what are some solutions? And Soraya mentions in her book that when she's on public transportation, she wears these hairpins, like a bun type thing. And the hairpins are daggers. Yeah. But I mean, that's not really answering what to do with rage. That's more how to protect yourself, which is something to be angry about, that women have to get on the bus with a hairpin on to think that they might need to stab somebody.
Although it would be enormously satisfying to just, stab the guy.
Oh no, Katie.
Just saying.
Although, like, I agree with you. It's so satisfying to think about, but I don't
Actually
really
doing it.
want to.
Yeah, I don't either.
Can you imagine stabbing somebody in the throat with a hairpin? Oh.
No, I think I'd probably stab him in the butt.
Let's like pick the best spot. I know. Okay. I mean, what do you think about rage? Like, do you have?
I was sent a book called Rage Baking. Baking is very therapeutic, right? You can knead things and beat things and so on and so on. And the other thing is that it's enormously satisfying relative to the amount of time compared to what I usually do, right? You spend 10 years writing a book. 10 people read it, 5 of them hate it. You spend 3 hours making a cake, 10 people eat it, 10 people love it. So in a weird way, rage baking is sort of, how I think about it. Like, how do I turn my anger into something that that is productive, like I did something, I made something that makes people happy. I often can't do that in the rest of my life. I do spend a lot of time when I'm teaching figuring out how to challenge the students not to be enraged, but to think about the world around them. And part of that is coming from my rage and anger about things that should not be in question are totally.
Shouldn't even be on the table. Yeah.
But there's always a risk, and I've gotten much better about the don't send the email right away kind of, because I will often just, shoot my mouth off. You can say, oh, well, you're being a girl, you're sort of, you're appeasing. But actually, usually it's that I've had time to let the white hot rage disappear and to think about what really needs to happen.
What you really want the outcome to be.
Yeah.
I'm getting a signal from Mo, like,
We just came here to say goodbye, actually. Yeah, and we have a small gathering of visitors who just came.
Oh, excellent.
The early wave.
Awesome.
Yeah, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you both so much.
all right.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.